people are 95% decided on the tool that they're using by the time they reach out to you. And so you've got to be there. You have to know what people are saying. You have to be involved. Because by the time someone's contacted you, they've basically already figured it out. It's totally different.
Welcome to the Rethink Revenue Podcast, where go-to-market teams and ambitious revenue leaders break down the toughest challenges, winning strategies, and cutting-edge tech, especially AI, that are driving growth. But it's not just about today. This show looks ahead to the future, where AI will redefine what it means to be a GTM leader.
Today, we are super excited to welcome Jessica Milmartin to the podcast. Most recently, Jessica was the CMO and CRO at Calendly, and you were responsible for all of the sales and marketing activities together. And before that, you were at Asana. You were heading the revenue marketing for Asana. And interestingly, both the companies have a combination of PLG and SLG and an enterprise motion, which is not that common. And it makes, I guess, your job tougher than a typical CRO. And we would love to hear about that. And you are currently a board member at Text Expander, and you are also a limited partner at Stage 2 Capital.
You got it.
Welcome to the show. Is there anything else that you want to add to that intro that makes more context getting added to the show?
Probably the only other big thing is that I'm an entrepreneur, which I think has led to a lot of the decisions that I've made and definitely has colored a lot of the ways that I've thought about marketing and sales. So I founded a chain of yogurt stores in the Bay Area and sold those before I entered into tech.
Perfect. Yeah, I had seen that in your profile. It is atypical to, typically people who are startup oriented, when they go to big companies, they don't typically translate themselves into the corporate American executive, but you were able to do both, which is pretty interesting. And we would love to explore that aspect as well, what prompted you to start and things like that. But thank you for joining. We are excited to have you on the show. And my questions around CRO and how a CRO is thinking today would love to hear from that perspective as a CRO's hat, mostly. As a CRO, if you were to drive a company today, let's take Calendly as an example or Asana as an example, what is that one thing that'll keep you up at night?
I think what I've seen over the past 15 years that I've been doing tech sales and marketing is that pipeline generation has gotten dramatically harder. All right. I think when I started, if you had good enough salespeople, good enough processes, systems, data management, you could create a pretty predictable pipeline. And I just am not seeing that these days. I think prospects are not responding to emails or phone calls the way they used to at even a fraction of the rate that they used to. And so a lot of the onus is now being put on marketing to generate leads. And that has a ton of other downstream effects in terms of cost of acquisition, the noise of whatever is happening out in social and Google and now chat and ChatGPT. And so I think it's just a lot harder to figure out how to get prospects to talk to you.
Got it. And that directly translates to the cost of customer acquisition. If you look at the public companies, they are all taking their time to get back the investment that they are making. So as a CRO, how are you managing this today? If you were to put your teams back, whether your CMO hat or CRO hat, how would you change your allocation of resources?
So really, it's about being as absolutely efficient as possible. And one thing that we saw at both Asana and Calendly, and one thing that I advise a lot of my customers to do is really start to look at, how do you expand the concept of pipeline generation? How do you think differently about it? And so it's not just about cold outbound anymore. I think that concept is very dated. And I think a lot of people are moving away from them. So I think number one, it's what are the smart tools? What are the systems and the tools and the processes that you can use to really try to reach out to people that are ready to speak to you? So I think that's fundamentally number one, which is not really thinking about pipeline generation as cold outbound anymore. I think number two is trying to mine your existing database as much as possible. Not just thinking about your job as a CRO as getting that first deal, but it's about that first deal, that expansion, that renewal. So really thinking about a customer journey over a longer period of time and not just that first moment. And I think very closely working with marketing to figure out how do you create the right customer persona? How do you understand what the signals are that would allow you to understand what are customers that are ready to talk to sales.
Got it. And if you look at the CRO title as such, the CRO title has been on the rise over the past couple of years. We have been hearing about sales and marketing alignment. And I would imagine CRO title is a way to kind of align your sales and marketing. And you had a role of CMO and CRO at Calendly. What's your perspective on CRO role and the responsibilities and how it's evolving in the world today?
Definitely what I've seen, the difference over the past few years is that the CRO title, I feel like, used to be almost siloed. Like you'd almost have a head of sales, a CRO that kind of was in their own world. They just focused on hitting the sales number. And it was very much like they just kind of sat in a corner and they only came out once a week to talk about how the projections were, what their pipeline was, what their forecast was. And they didn't really get involved with the rest of the business. And now I'm seeing it very, very different. So I think a CRO has to be much more holistic in their thinking. They have to have a seat at the table when thinking about where the company is going, what the strategic direction is, what the product direction is. They need to be working really closely with the head of CS, with the head of marketing, to really think about the customer journey and how do you make the most of every customer. It's not just the first sale anymore. It's the first sale, it's the second sale, it's the fifth, it's the 10th sale, it's renewal, it's retention. Those are things that a CRO has to now be involved in a way that I just don't think they had to before.
It's interesting that you say that. I haven't seen enough, and I hope it becomes more. I haven't seen enough leaders transitioning from marketing to CROs. Typically, it is the VP of sales that becomes the CRO. We saw that Six Sense, Latani moved from CMO to CRO, and you had a marketing background. You went up to the CRO at a big company like Calendly. Why do you think there aren't more CMO CROs, I guess?
Well, I don't think a lot of marketing people want to do sales. Sales is pretty hard. But I think it is a very different skill set. And I actually had taken over sales many years ago, or actually I started sales many years ago at a small startup. And so I understood what it was like to build a sales team from scratch, to build the sales process, operations. Very few marketers have done that. And I think it's also very hard for a CMO to take over a revenue team and understand what they're going through, understand the complexities of sales, have the empathy for a salesperson. And it's just, they're very different skill sets. Even though marketing and sales are very inextricably linked, running marketing and running sales, totally different. Marketing is obviously a lot about the creativity, and it's a lot about managing people and managing the integration of activities among a group. Sales is very individual, and sales is very much about creating processes and systems and operations and forecasting and hitting numbers consistently. It's very different. So even though they seem similar from the outside, they're actually quite different when you're running them. And I think, there's just a lot of really great salespeople that come up through the ranks that it's an obvious next step for them to be sales leaders. I just don't think it's as obvious for a lot of marketers to take that next step and understand how to build high-performing sales teams.
Makes sense. The KPIs that you look for when you're a CMO, because you're probably focused on the pipeline as the metric, and then you obviously look at the downstream numbers. But when you transition from like a marketing role to a CRO role, what were some of the other KPIs that became super high priority immediately for you?
I think one of the differences with me is because I came from an entrepreneurial background, because I came from a sales background, I always focus on the revenue number. And I think that that's unusual for marketers. I think where a lot of the friction comes between marketing and sales is that marketing does tend to focus on some of those upstream numbers like MQLs, leads, pipeline, and are ultimately not focused on the number that is really the only thing that matters, which is revenue. And so I think that as a CMO and a CRO, both of you should be thinking about the revenue that the business drives. I also think one of the things that has really changed over the past couple of years versus previous years is customer acquisition cost. And that's very, very important. So that's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and owning both sides. I can really think about the total CAC, the total efficiency, including all of sales, all of marketing, all the dollars we're spending. I think the other thing that changes a lot is moving from just thinking about acquiring a customer, but a CRO, in my opinion, should be thinking about retention too, because it doesn't help the business to sign up a customer who doesn't use the product and who churns in a year. That is very expensive to the business to do that. And so thinking about who are the customers that marketing should bring in that not only turn into a first deal, but that turn into good long-term customers, I think is a really big change if you're moving to a CRO role.
Yeah, if we can double click on the CAC point that you mentioned, which is a big difference between like a marketing alone looking versus looking at the loaded CAC. So there is the conventional saying that CAC to LTV should be 1:3, 1:2, 1 something. Do you follow that kind of a ratio? What does good look like when you look at CAC?
So we looked at two different things. One is the lifetime CAC, and I think that, so LTV, which I think is probably the best way to look at things, especially in a PLG business where you would expect that a certain number of your deals turn into you have a significant upside over the next few years. You also have to look at retention. So if you're in a business where it seems good in the beginning and then all of a sudden, but your customers keep churning, then it's important to look at that lifetime value of a customer. The other thing we looked at was total new business that was coming in over the total dollars that we were spending on people and programs. And obviously you want that to be over 1. So that's what we looked at on a year basis. And that gave us a good indication of not just our total amount. In a SaaS business, you can rely a lot on the amount of money that you brought in already, but you really want to make sure that the new money that you're bringing in is more than the amount of money that you're spending every year. That's hard to do. It's hard to balance.
And the new money is a sum of the new business, new logos, and new money from the existing logos.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. That's a really good metric because it's almost like a unit economics. If you got that right, then you can scale because your unit economics is strong. Got it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And when you drive a PLG and SLG, like an enterprise motion together, that is super complicated at that point, right? Because your messaging, your website, so difficult to manage. I've heard in the past, I don't know when, but there was a time when people exclaimed that Calendly's website is reaching because, at the end of the day, it's a really good scheduling tool. But when you say that, hey, it'll help in, higher conversion is probably right, but higher ACVs, that's like a stretching thing for a scheduling tool to claim. But again, it's a PLG tool and an SLG tool. How do you manage it? When does a lead transfer from like a product led to like a sales led?
Well, I could talk about that for days. So I'll try to do it not in days, but in minutes. And honestly, the reason that I have been attracted to Asana and Calendly for the past few years is like managing a hybrid business to me is the hardest thing to do in go-to-market. And so that's what's really fun for me is that there's no playbook. And when I came to Calendly, I thought it was going to be very similar to Asana, and it was totally different. Even though they were both PLG, SLG enterprise businesses, they were fundamentally different in terms of how we attracted customers, how we expanded them. And so I love it. I think it's the way that every company should go. And so I think it's the kind of the modern way to sell and market. And I think the thing that I tell, and I advise a lot of companies now on their go-to-market motions. And the number one thing that I say, and the number one thing I did when I got to Calendly is focus on the customer. And what people always forget to do is think about the customer journey. And what they tend to think about is, this is what I want a customer to do. So I want a customer like this to sign up, and I want a customer like this to talk to a salesperson. But that's not necessarily what customers want to do. So that's really what I focused on with our website at Calendly, which is just getting a customer to the right place as quickly and efficiently as cost effectively as possible. And so if a VP at a Fortune 500 company wants to sign up for our product, we're not going to force them to talk to a salesperson, which is what I've seen a lot of people do. We're going to allow them to sign up for our product, but we're going to have a lot of signals that allow us to understand whether that person is taking actions that would lead to us being able to reach out to have a conversation. And on the other side, if there's a solo entrepreneur who wants to buy one seat, but wants to talk to a salesperson, well, we're going to figure out how to get them to talk to a support person who's very inexpensive, but who can help them with their questions and help them close their business. And we can do that very cost efficiently. And so that's really how we think about it, which is creating as many pathways as we can to really enable people to self-serve, to talk to a salesperson in the way that they want.
Got it. And was there specific metrics that you were looking at? After this metric, then we would call it a PQL, like a product qualified lead.
So the big thing that we did is we didn't focus on the demographic of the person, which is what a lot of people do. So they say, okay, a PQL is someone with the right title who, logged in 2 times. By definition, that's not a PQL. PQL has the word product in it for a reason, because it's somebody that has taken action and has done something in the product that indicates that they're ready to talk to sales. It's not just that they have the right title. And so what we looked at is we basically looked at all of the actions previously, and we said, okay, when people upgraded or when people contacted us to talk to sales, what were the things that they tended to do before then that indicated that they were ready? And so we had a list of sort of 3 to 4 signals that indicated to us that this was most likely a person that was going to be right for a conversation. And so that those would be the ones that would kind of float up. And we would then do a series of very targeted emails to them. So for example, one of the big indications for us of someone that was ready to upgrade is when they integrated their CRM. That was just a good indication that they were most likely going to want this for multiple salespeople. And so we would email them an automated email and say, hey, we noticed that you just integrated your Salesforce. Did you know that you could do these other 3 things with Salesforce? You can do this on our enterprise plan, our teams plan. Would you like to talk to a salesperson? And if they said yes, then they could schedule a meeting with the salesperson right from that email using Calendly. And so a salesperson didn't even have to be involved in that. It was just all automated, but it felt very personal from the customer perspective. So those are the things that we started to look at, and I think started to work very well.
All right. And earlier you mentioned that the motions that you saw at Asana, while you expected the same at Calendly, they were very, very different. Of course, Asana has like an in-company virality because I will bring in Asana and get my team together, versus Calendly has an external virality because I'm going to bring in Calendly and send an invite to you. I can see that from the outside, but what else was different?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. And that actually is very fundamentally different, because at Asana, you had to spend a good amount of money on acquisition to get that first person to use it. And it was a very considered purchase, because people are thinking about, do I want Asana versus multiple competitors? How am I actually going to use this? Am I ready to change my workflows? Because Asana really is about, a project management tool is about fundamentally changing your workflows. And so the barrier to getting someone to use it for the first time is very high. But then, yes, as you said, internally, so really our focus at Asana was getting that first person in and then really trying to work with them over time on that expansion. At Calendly, and we had a harder time getting that sort of first big deal because it was so much about land expand. It's different now. I mean, they're focused much more on enterprise. At Calendly, it's, in my opinion, the most viral product on earth. I mean, there's literally 0 CAC. You don't spend anything about getting that first customer, but it doesn't have that internal virality. And so we had to spend a lot more time educating our existing users on, hey, this is working great for you. It's very easy to set up. You got it done. It takes almost no rejiggering of your workflows. It's just like genius and obvious. But okay, now you're using it for you. What's the value now of using it for 5 people, 10 people, 100 people within your organization? And so that just, it's a totally, it seems subtle, but it's actually a totally different way of thinking about the sales and the post-sales process.
Yeah, makes sense. I did not foresee that considered purchase at the top. When I put myself as a buyer, if I have to buy like a tool like an Asana, then I am thinking for my whole team, spending all the cycles upfront and then picking an Asana versus a Monday.com. Versus Calendly, I'll sign up just like that, and then we'll figure out whether the team needs it or not. Makes total sense. I hadn't considered that. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about AI, because you cannot not talk about AI these days.
Certainly required.
Right, exactly. Certainly growing in adoption. How do you see AI impacting the CRO role, the go-to-market motion in B2B companies in the, let's say, near future and also a little bit far-fetched as you see?
Yeah, so I would say right now the hype is definitely bigger than the impact, but I see that changing pretty quickly. And I was a big AI skeptic about a year ago, but I'm coming around. So I think what I'm seeing is pretty interesting. So I think number one, we're seeing a lot of bad outreach, AI outreach happening. And I think that's just worsening the pipeline issue and the pipeline generation issue because it's just going to be noisier and noisier with the number of AI tools that are going to be out there. I think eventually it's going to be better. Right now it's not. But I think what's going to happen then is you're going to have to rethink, you may not need SDRs. Like this is going to be totally different in terms of pipeline generation. The second is around forecasting. So I'm already seeing that. And obviously every CRO knows how much time they spend on pipeline management, on forecasting. And I think that that's going to pretty dramatically change. I think you're going to have a lot of AI intelligence that's really going to allow you to understand what is real, what's not, creating forecasts for you, creating a real pipeline for you, which I think is actually pretty amazing, just given how difficult it is to really accurately forecast. So I'm probably most excited about that. I think the other thing that I'm seeing are AI agents, and I'm seeing like AI agents that are coming out that totally automate the sales process. I think a lot of the work that people spend right now on repeatable sort of manual tasks, my guess is a lot of that's going to go away, which I think is pretty exciting. And I think the final thing that I'm most excited about, which I'm not seeing yet, but I believe it's going to come, is we talked about PQLs. I think there's going to be a lot of ways that you're going to be able to understand the signals that allow you to figure out whether a customer is ready to talk to or not. I think to me, that's one of the hardest things is if you have a available universe of say 5 million sales operations leaders, who are the ones that you should actually talk to? Who are the ones that are, have indicated interest or are looking at this problem, are using your product, but are ready for expansion? And right now it's so manual. And I think there's going to be a world where all of that's automated.
Got it. As you were speaking about individual things, I was thinking about companies that are operating in the space, including Docket, for example, when you mentioned about manual processes and automation of RFP processes or, sales engineering processes, things like that. But I think I'm aligned 100% about AI SDRs and then forecasting and all of it. By the way, I run an AI company. I'm obviously bullish, but I also agree with you that the impact versus the hype is way more than the impact that it's delivering today. If you could automate one part of your process with AI today, what would that be?
Annual planning is not my favorite thing.
So when you say planning, is it capacity planning? Is it allocation? Is it territory management? Which part of the planning?
All the planning, the figuring out the number, the ultimate goal and how you're going to get there and the people that you need and the monthly, the waterfall and what leads you need and pipeline you need and key program dollars. It's a lot of work. It's months and months of work. And I like to do stuff. I like to be active, and just to be selling and marketing and taking 3 months every year to do planning is pretty painful. Important. I do it, but painful.
Yep. For the founders who are listening, looking for the right problem statement to go after, there you go. That's a very, very interesting problem statement. And to be honest, I haven't seen enough AI agents directly focused there yet. So, it's actually a pretty good opportunity, at least.
And pretty great to press a button and then have the whole thing just done for you.
Yeah, at least a few options, right? Here are the few options. And then you say, oh, this is not right. We want to move it to this one. And in a conversation, you kind of get the plan to 80%, and then you take that and then work on it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
In your world, obviously CRO, CMO, both worlds, it's moving so fast today, right? And you have to upskill yourself. You have to learn yourself. How do you do that? Is it books? Is it podcast? What do you do?
So number one thing for me is I just like to talk to other smart people. So I'm in a ton of networking groups. I'm always trying to go to as many dinners and events. I'm on a ton of Slack groups with other CMOs and CROs, and I just listen to what they're saying. I like to attend a lot of webinars. So for me, it's very much face-to-face. I'm not a big podcast person. I just don't have the time. Not like a big book person. I do love newsletters. So I love blogs and newsletters, anything, because I think for me, I like the frequency of information. So I like, every week I know that I'm just going to get like really intelligent information on the latest stuff. So Kyle Puyar, I don't know if you know Kyle from OpenView, he has a great newsletter called Growth Unhinged, and I love that one. And he's really going all in on AI now too. So it's really interesting. He's got he's got a pulse on, what are the latest and greatest in terms of pricing models, go-to-market models. So I think that's really interesting.
Kyle is amazing. I had a recent interaction on LinkedIn with him about the exact same topic that you mentioned, which is pricing models, the post that he put up. Other than Growth Unhinged, which is awesome, are there other newsletters that you would recommend to the listeners?
So the biggest one that I love, it's not as relevant, it's more of a marketing one, but it's called Gobbledy. And it's very much about messaging, which I love. It's very much about understanding the customer and making sure that your messaging is relevant to your customer. It's very simple. So I look forward to his newsletter that comes out every week.
Awesome. And are there any communities that you recommend to the revenue leaders?
The ones that I'm in are all closed. So I'm trying to think of ones that are not. So probably not as helpful. Sorry.
No worries. I am also part of a bunch of communities, and I also get to learn quite a bit. I think you would be thinking
what are the ones that you like?
I do I'm on Pavilion. It's awesome. And then there is Rev Genius. Then I'm also part of a few enablement communities because Docket is about account executive enablement. So I'm part of Sales Enablement Collective, Enablement Squad. Then, there's something called Pre-Sales something. So a few, these are all Slack communities. And obviously there's a ton of interaction happening there. I do every 4 days or 3 days, I go look at everything that's happening. Another hack that I do is in Slack, you can put up notifications for your own keywords. So in every community, I'll go and put 5 keywords that I care about, like RFP and, enablement. So when people are mentioning that, I get a notification, I'll quickly go look at that. Otherwise, the noise is so much that you cannot really go through the whole thing. So that's my hack to kind of getting information from communities.
Yeah, I always search for Calendly at Asana just to make sure, because it is actually great, especially if you are selling to this group. It's also, you should be a part of all of them because you see all of the chatter. And that's another really interesting, that's such an interesting thing that's happened now over the past few years in terms of selling is, people used to do a very surface amount of sort of research before deciding to reach out to a company. And then they would get their information from the different salespeople and then make a decision. That's just not the case anymore. People are 95% decided on the tool that they're using by the time they reach out to you. And so much of it, I see it as, hey, how about this versus this versus this? Have you used an RFP tool? Have you used this? And it's all happening in social. It's all happening on these channels. And so you've got to be there. You have to know what people are saying. You have to be involved. Because by the time someone's contacted you, they've basically already figured it out. It's totally different.
And as a last question, if there is an upcoming revenue leader, whether it is marketing side or sales side, what's your advice if they are eyeing to become a CRO in the future? What should they do now?
Think as expansively as possible. Know as much as you can learn about the other go-to-market functions and all the functions that will impact you. So finance is a great example. You have to have a really strong relationship with your finance team. You have to understand finance really well. You have to understand the numbers really well. You have to have a great relationship with your product team, understand the development, understand marketing, how they make decisions, understand the post-sale process. When you move into a C-level title, your role and the expectations of your role change completely. You're now an executive that's responsible for the entire business, not just your part of it. And so if you can speak intelligently about all of the parts of the business, how they all impact sales, and how you will be a great steward and leader of the company, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for someone that is not just thinking about their world and their number, but someone that's thinking about the best thing for the company.
Perfect. There you go, everybody. Thanks a lot, Jessica, for joining today and dropping the wisdom here. I appreciate your time. And to all those listeners joining us, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.